Imagine being Hirohiko Araki at the conclusion of part 3. What it would have been like watching the final chapter of Stardust Crusaders be published and be faced with the question of what comes next. Where do you go after Jotaro, after Dio, after the introduction of stands in a story that spanned entire continents and in the process forever changed battle manga? Well, if you're Araki, the answer is simple. You make one of the best goddamn things you've ever made. You make part 4. I love parts 1 to 3, but I do feel like you can still see Araki struggling with the different elements of the story in each respective one. Part 1's reactionary protagonist, Part 2's so-so villains, and the litany of more minor issues that plagued Part 3. But Part 4 feels like the culmination of all Araki's work up until this point. It's every mistake he's made and every lesson he's learned from it, and the result is a story that feels bold, different, and confident. And the thing that differentiates Diamond as Unbreakable from its predecessors is actually something really simple. Scale. Parts 1 to 3 were these grand, epic, globe-spanning journeys, ones that culminated in world-shattering clashes of good and evil, whose outcome dictated the destiny of the entire planet. But in Part 4 is downright intimate by comparison. The entire series takes place in a single sleepy town, and the events that transpire here don't change the fate of humanity or even have any bearing on any future parts. It's just the story of a couple of bizarre months in the quiet town, Morio. The story begins with previous protagonist Jotaro Kujo traveling to Morio in the hopes of defeating a stand-wielding serial killer who's recently escaped from prison. And it's here he meets Josuke Higashikata, the JoJo of this part, who is actually Jotaro's estranged uncle. It's complicated. And from the outset, Josuke feels entirely different from the previous protagonists. When we first meet him, he's being bullied by older students, and then after a brief misunderstanding, gets his face punched in by Jotaro. But this is actually important to showing what kind of character Josuke is, as it immediately establishes that Josuke is not the invincible badass that Jotaro was. Instead, he's just a teenager, and so is Jotaro, but only really in age, as we never got to see him actually act like it. The mere presence of Dio in Part 3, as well as the ticking clock on Holly's life, meant that the entire focus of Stardust Crusaders' plot involved getting to Dio as quickly as possible, and each encounter along the way only served to bring Jotaro closer to that point. And while there is danger in Part 4, there is no world-ending threat. And this frees Josuke from having to be the more traditional kind of hero, and instead, we get to just watch him go to school and hang out at cafes and play video games. We get to see him as a teenager, and overall he just feels like a kinder, gentler JoJo. And what's cool is how this manifests in his stand Crazy Diamond, whose primary skill is to return objects to the way they once were, which serves two functions. One, it provides some creative options in combat encounters, and two, and more importantly, it allows Josuke to heal people of their injuries. But critically, he cannot heal himself. This is important because this means Josuke's primary stand ability necessitates a degree of selflessness in the character, while also meaning that Josuke is at his most effective combat-wise when allied with other stand users, which is appropriate because a major theme in Part 4 is friendship. While friendship was a big part of the previous series, it always seemed to feed back into the main character's motivation as opposed to being a theme in and of itself. Take, for example, the deaths of Dyer, Caesar, Avdol, Iggy, and Kakyoin. All characters who were killed in order to further motivate the heroes of their respective stories to take down the villain. But in Part 4, Josuke's friends play a much more central role narrative, with a much stronger sense that these are characters who spend time together purely because they enjoy each other's company and not to pursue a larger goal, which gives this really pleasant, nearly slice of life style feeling to the occurrences of Part 4. And it's fun watching the different relationships form between the different characters, like Rohan's intense dislike of Josuke, or Josuke's exuberant friendship with Yasu. This dynamic also makes it feel far less like just Josuke's story, and instead like a far broader narrative concentrating on a group of friends, with the point of view occasionally switching entirely to that of characters. You can see this especially early on with Koichi. He's actually the first character we meet, and the opening chapter actually takes place from his point of view. He initially takes the Speedwagon-esque role of running commentator. Over the course of the series, he evolves and develops in a way that feels more typical to the standard shonen hero than Josuke. His own character arc, relationships, and power moments that effectively move the character out of Josuke's shadow and lets him emerge as something more than just a standing sidekick. I can say similar things about nearly every other major cast member before, but my personal favourites are Shiro Rohan and Yasu Fujiwara. Rohan is an especially interesting character, as many see him as a self-insert for Araki. And this adds up, he is an eccentric, hyper-skilled manga artist. I think more specifically what Rohan is and what makes him so damn fascinating is that he's a distillation of Araki's philosophy towards creating manga. Araki's book, Manga in Theory and Practice, which is a fantastic resource if you should read, Araki talks about how to be a manga author, you need to sustain an infinite curiosity for the world around you, and that curiosity is the very basis of Rohan's character. In particular, the infamous scene where he cuts open a spider and licks it, purely to gain a deeper understanding of how the creature works internally, so he can more accurately depict it in manga. I guess. It's this obsessive curiosity that drives his personality, but is also expressed through his stand, Heaven's Door, which transforms people's bodies into grotesque books, allowing Rohan to read their life story and peer into the very fibre of their being. And so it's the same character trait that defines him as a person, drives his stand, and even brings him into conflict with Josuke, as Rohan develops an unhealthy obsession with Koichi, tearing his pages out for study, setting up for a gruesome but striking introduction, but also giving great insight into how Rohan works internally. Rohan also appears to be one of Araki's favourite characters in all of JoJo's, which he himself denies, but this picture he drew of himself and Rohan hugging says otherwise. But it's also led to Rohan starring in several of his own one-shot stories, such as Millionaire's Village and Rohan at the Louvre. I think the latter is especially interesting as it takes place 10 years after the events of Diamond is Unbreakable, and it has this particularly beautiful spread where a crying woman collapses into Rohan's arms, and his first instinct is to use Heaven's Door to find out what's wrong with her. Then he decides it wouldn't be right to peer into her.
What the? Oh god!
Something that never would have occurred to Rohan. Like in the 10 years between the two, he's learned to respect the boundaries of others. This scene is also emblematic of something Araki does like a few others, his ability to age and maturity. Jotaro in Part 4 is still the same stoic badass we came to know reading, but he's also significantly kinder and softer this time around, which I like to believe is a change brought about by the concluding events of Part 3, but I might be too much into that. But it results in Jotaro feeling like a supportive, cooler older brother to the younger cast of Part 4. I'm especially fond of one scene in particular midway through Episode 2, where Jotaro displays a warmth and compassion towards Josuke that was never present in Stardust Crusaders. Joseph Joestar also returns but in an older, frailer state. His treatment is a little more melancholic. We have watched this character grow throughout his entire life, and watching him reach his twilight years and lose the ability to engage in stand battles is oddly moving, but it's also a little sad. In particular in the scenes where he struggles to relate to Josuke, who is his estranged son, and it gives this real bittersweet tinge to the pair's reunion as well as their interactions that follow. There feels like much more.
All I really missed out were
kind of complicated
the hay bales I was gonna take.
Something that would be further explored by the protagonists of Part 5 and 6, but is also present in my dear sweet idiot boy Yasu. He enters the story as a minor villain in the show's second arc, and does so under the manipulation of his sinister older brother Keicho. Keicho soon exits the story, leaving Okuyasu alone with anyone to really anchor him, which is a problem as, under his own admission, Okuyasu is not especially intelligent and has difficulty making decisions for himself. And so, nearly immediately after their battle, Yasu befriends Josuke in a way that's kind of comical, but it also makes you feel a little bad for the character. It's like he really just needs someone to ground him and doesn't want to own. That same simple nature that makes him both comedic and endearing is also a trait that defines his battle style. Okuyasu's stand is the hand, which has the rather terrifying ability to erase anything it touches, which is potentially an ability that is insanely overpowered. It's limited by Okuyasu's basic, straightforward outlook, with him often trying to crush his opponents with direct frontal attacks as opposed to using any strategy. And you can really see him struggle when his opponents make use of the more complicated mind games that are inherent to stand-ons. And so, just like Josuke and Rohan, there's an internal consistency to Okuyasu. The character trait that limits his potentially overpowered stand is the same characteristic that defines him as a person and also what leads him to fighting befriending Josie. It feels like I'm spending a lot of time breaking down these characters. Well, I am, but I think it's important to highlight just how much more developed they are than past and previous parts. I could write paragraphs like this on Abdal, Kaku, and Polnareff because the same level of writing and nuance just isn't there. And as a result, the cast of Part 4 feel a lot more fully formed, which means that when stand battles do happen, we're a lot more invested in the fate of these characters. And incidentally, the writing behind the stand battles has also been great. The abilities and stands tend to be a lot more reflective of their users' personalities and a lot less directly suited to combat. But this allows for a lot more creativity in the encounters, as there's now a much greater emphasis on seeing users manipulating their opponents into the hyper-specific situations where their stands will be most effective. Take, for example, Kobayashi's stand Lock. Lock has the ability to manifest a giant block on people's chests that grows larger and heavier the guiltier the victim feels. So Kobayashi's battle style is to remove his target as much guilt as possible, activate the stand, and then extort the person in the game. As we see in his showdown with Koichi, where he inflicts his stand on Koichi's mother and sister in an attempt to have them sign over property rights to the house. I see this fight as a particularly important evolution of Part 4, as it's not directly really a fight at all. Rock's objective isn't to harm Koichi or his family. His objective is to steal their home. And Koichi in turn isn't trying to kill Locke. He just wants to get him to stop targeting his family. Compare that to the simpler battles of Part 3, where every enemy stand user is in service of Tio and the objective is always to eliminate Jotaro and Co. But by contrast, the lack of a central united villain in Part 4 means that each individual villain has their own specific reasons for encountering heroes, such as Yukako falling in love with Koichi and then kidnapping him in one of my favorite arcs of the entire series. Her motive isn't simply to eliminate our heroes, and she's not a pawn of a larger villain. She's just an admittedly unhinged person doing what makes sense to her, which makes her battle with Koichi and how she applies her stand feel entirely different from any other encounter. And it's this kind of writing that constantly leads to Part 4's less conventional setups. Scenarios like Let's Go Eat Italian Food, Kishiba Rohan's Adventure, or I Am an Alien don't even really have battles or enemy stand users. Instead, the focus of these arcs is just on our heroes exploring Oreo and encountering the various oddities that exist in it. And as a result, they're some of the most unique and enjoyable of the entire series. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still JoJo's, it still has invisible ghost aliens beating the shit out of people, and in one case a plate of spaghetti, and it still occasionally goes headlong into nightmarish horror. But the increased focus on its characters and the more distinctive encounters means that we get
I could live here for a bit, I suppose.
on a typical good versus evil story, and one that's a lot more about exploring what it's like to be a teenager living in the town of Oreo, and in the process creating a beautifully enjoyable hybrid of the most bizarre slice of life series that's ever existed, crossed with all the battle-based excitement you'd expect from JoJo's. Part 4 also serves as a pivotal milestone for Araki as an artist. From Part 1 all the way through to the currently running Part 8, you can see a massive change in how Araki draws his characters, which we talked about a lot in previous videos, but what's fascinating about Part 4 is that it's the direct center point of this artistic shift. And I don't mean that numerically. You can literally watch Araki's character work grow softer and looser expressive over the course of Diamond is
Not bad. Yeah, I'll live here for a bit.
taking on a look that would be more representative of his line of work. Part 4 is also where you can really see Araki starting to play with character design, integrating the core themes of the story into the look of its characters. For example, take the concept of inheritance or passing the torch, a central theme in the broader JoJo story.
Fuck.
Just look at how he works it into JoJo's design. Whereas Jonathan and Joseph were made to look nearly identical as to assure readers it was in fact the same series,
That was really stupid of me.
a direct evolution of Jotaro's. Jotaro was designed around the concept of Banjo, strong silent delinquents who were especially popular in Japanese fiction in the late 70s. However, in the 80s, the Banjo fell out of fashion and were replaced by a different kind of delinquent, which were the more rebellious, brasher, and disrespectful evolution of Banjo. And it's the Yankee that Josuke's look is based off, with the more flamboyant clothing and pompadour-styled hair. And so you can see the generational shift between Banjo and Yankee expressed through the designs of Jotaro and Josuke. To a Japanese public at least, whatever really effectively signified that Josuke is a more modern version of Jotaro. Araki would continue to play with this concept of evolving character designs a lot more with the other protagonists, like how the empty space on Josuke's chest forms a hard motif in Josuke's design, and that motif is then tightened up for Giorno's design, or becoming a solid stone in Jolie's. And I love this, as it so effectively establishes a visual through line between these four characters, linking their appearances, but also effectively visually conveying their familiar bloodline and shared destiny. The shift in art style, I imagine, would have given David Productions, the studio behind the anime adaptation, some difficulties. Do they go with the earlier style that's more in line with the previous series, or the softer artwork Part 4 would eventually evolve into? And somewhat controversial.
What the hell is that over there?
Seems to be tweaking more towards the latter. Isn't 100% faithful to either. And while I do understand the criticisms, to me, an adaptation should alter the aesthetic of the source material to properly take advantage of the medium it's being adapted into. And it's for this reason I think the adaptation of Part 4 is not only successful, but goddamn beautiful. It has its caveats which we'll get into, but its strength is how it uses animation and film to really accentuate the bizarre, carefree feeling of Diamond is on Crash. And one of the main ways you can see this is editing. It's covered for scenes and shots together, creating this nearly surreal, dreamlike experience. Like, take for example this shot of Jotaro in the hotel. He hangs up the phone in his hotel room and climbs down into a taxi that's waiting for him outside his hotel. They're easy to miss, but moments like this create a playful quality to how part moves between shots and locations. And it both serves to keep the action flowing nicely in the action scenes, while also giving this amazing, bizarre atmosphere to the town of Oreo, like it's a place where the laws of time and space don't apply. The same playfulness carries right through to every part of the show's art direction, and in particular, the use of colour. Rather than grounding the show's palette in a semblance of sanity, Oreo is a town exploding with eccentric colour choices. A place of yellow skies and purple trees whose palettes swim and flow to match the emotion and intensity of the scene. Interestingly, this colour treatment actually ties directly into Araki's own philosophy regarding colour. He stated in several interviews how he doesn't view his world or characters with any consistent colour palette. Rather, in his mind, a character's colour is dictated by the emotion and environment of the scene. And the anime plays with this ethos in a way that black and white manga never would. Even the line work the characters are rendered in has the same hyper-stylized quality, with the character art often being drawn in beautifully rhythmic, thick black lines, giving the character art a fun, eccentric, nearly pop art style vibe. Feels inspired by artists like Witches. This is taken to a gorgeous, ludicrous extreme in some of the show's lavishly illustrated still shots, which combine the beautiful line work and vibrant color design to create images that are so striking that I don't even care that they're very. And even on that front, while the movement of the characters is generally pretty limited, simpler character designs do allow for the show to occasionally really bring it animation-wise, with intense bursts of sakuga punctuating many of the show's action scenes. So, with all this in mind, manga or anime, Well, they both have their strengths and weaknesses. The advantage of the manga is the same advantage of any manga. You're experiencing the story exactly from the author, 100% how they intended. And for as much as I'm willing to praise the anime, there's areas where it does fall short of the manga, and one area it especially does is some of the facial illustration, and particularly in the facial model of Yoshikage Kira. In the manga, Kira has this serene yet threatening beauty that makes the character both alluring and frightening. But that sense never really comes across in the anime, which is a real shame given how important the story. But I also do wonder if this change was made in an attempt to not get sued by David's estate. Part 4 is also the most pivotal part in terms of Araki's evolution as an artist, so if you have any investment in it specifically, manga is the way to go. The only real drawback of manga is that the story drags into the third quarter, with a few battles that really feel like padding, which is frustrating, especially as it's leading into the final conflict. Thankfully, this same section has been heavily edited down and restructured in the anime, and the story flows a lot better because of it. The anime also features some additional scenes and stylistic flourishes that I feel are
Why can't I run up this wall?
small touches like the shot of Josephine jumping upstairs, exactly how I used to when I was a teenager, or my bones had withered to dust and ash. Touches like this, alongside the show's strong production and yet another phenomenal soundtrack, means that overall the anime is an extremely strong package. But there is, unfortunately, the occasional nosedive quality. One scene in particular being the Shinobu and Kira bedroom scene. This is one of my favorite themes from the manga as it's so palpable with tension and danger, but the horribly off-model characters and weak storyboarding completely squanders any impact on the scene.
I'm just gonna get rid of this.
These issues were, however, actually completely remedied by the edits made to the Blu-ray version. Fortunately, that's not the version available on Crunchyroll, and the Blu-ray has not got a release in the West. So if you want to experience the anime in all its glory, you're going to have to get a little ultimately, I don't think you can go wrong with either version, but personally, I did enjoy my rewatching the anime more than I did the manga. That's with the caveat of it being the Blu-ray version and not the original broadcast. There is one final element to this story that we still need to talk about. One critical piece of the puzzle that's missing, and it is Yoshikage Kira. We already spoke about Kira as an individual in our villains, but I think what's really more interesting is the larger effect Kira has on the story. We meet Kira halfway through, and by introducing him so late, it lets us get to know more Kira. We get to experience the fun, bizarre side of his town, the carefree existence of Josuke's friends. And so when Kira is introduced and immediately kills one of those friends and is revealed to be the serial killer behind the disappearances, he shatters that existence. We share in the shock and heartbreak of our heroes. Kira's existence scars for you. He destroys the carefree reality, joining up to his points. At 33 years old, Kira has lived his entire life, during which time he's murdered dozens and dozens of women, severing their hands and becoming politically involved with them. He serves as the central villain for the story's second half, but that said, he's an entirely different kind of villain to Dio Carlos. Those were villains who were loud and charismatic, ones who rallied entire armies and were obsessed with proving their superiority over heroes. But Kira is different. He doesn't want glory or a following or to take over the world. All he wants is to continue to live quietly in the shadows and destroy as many heroes as possible. Victory or success aren't important to Kira. In fact, he completely avoids any action that could draw attention to himself. Something we get a disturbing window into, but later on in the series, our protagonist explores home. And it paints the picture of a bizarre, plastic existence. He spent his entire life aiming to be forgotten, achieving to the point that he's accepted by his peers, but never excelling enough to properly stand out, as we can see from his collection of third-place trophies and modest academic accomplishments, even positioning himself in photographs as to blend in as much as possible. It's this social camouflage that I think makes Kira so unsettling, and there's a number of scenes that play with this directly, where heroes encounter Kira out in public but have no idea it's him, oblivious to the fact that the killer they've been searching for is hiding all in sight. And there's something so alien and frightening, and at the heart of why Kira feels so threatening. He's the guy in the office you never really speak to, the stranger who sits next to you on the bus, that feeling that we never really know what's going through the minds of the people around us, or what might be happening behind closed doors in the homes of our neighbours. He's that deeply unsettling fear personified. He is the dark part of suburban existence. This concept gets explored even further later on in the story, but warns we're meant to go into some major spoiler territory. Eventually, our heroes manage to track down Kira, and after a grueling battle, expose his identity and not corner him. And in a last-minute act of gruesome desperation, he escapes. But for one brief moment, the camouflage Kira has spent his entire life building up comes crumbling down around him as he staggers down the street, battered and insulted. Only then, in a last-ditch effort to blend back into society, Kira kills a man and in the process steals his face, identity, and takes over his life, completely disappearing into society. And I love this turn of the story because it both establishes Kira's horrifying tenacity and ability to survive, also introducing the narrative of Hayato, the son of the man Kira murdered and whose identity was stolen. Hayato begins to suspect that his father, despite looking exactly the same, may not be who he used to be and starts recording Kira's name. What's interesting though, and this is just my own speculation, is that the idea of this arc seems to be based on the psychiatric condition known as the Capris delusion. A delusion where a person believes that someone close to them has been replaced by an identical imposter. And I think that's an amazing concept to work into Kira's character, as it takes stability of hiding insight to a horrifying extreme. As our heroes slowly begin to track down Kira, Hayato uncovers his secret, and the resulting
Hey,
conflict
yo.
forces Kira's stand to evolve the horrifying Bite the Dust, which to dramatically oversimplify, traps
Fletch.
anyone who discovers Kira's identity
A hummingbird,
in a
I guess.
in which they are murdered over and over, giving Kira a seemingly perfect defense against our heroes, and making for one of the most tense and desperate final battles of this or any new series. But it's also in this final battle we can see the true strength of Diamond's Breakable. And it's a battle that develops and delivers on all the themes the series has been built up to until this ends. As unlike previous arcs, it's not merely a one-on-one fight between but instead everyone together trying to survive its Kira's nightmare. Each character has their own role to play against them.
Lol.
In other words, the friendship and spirit that's formed between Josuke and his friends versus the perverse, invincible
Deep slate.
solitude Kira has surrounded himself. And it's a fight that's not only desperate and exciting, but feels more thematic and resonant than any finale that's come before. It's not merely hero versus villain, but a community of people coming together in an attempt to eradicate a deep, insidious evil that's rooted itself in their society. And I think that's a really powerful story to tell. More than anything else, though, Part 4 feels like the culmination of everything Araki's been working towards, both being an incredibly fun and spirited slice of life / battle series, crossed with a deeply dark and horrifying look at the most insidious parts of suburban life and the resulting battle when those worlds collide. This is why Part 4 is my favorite part. This is why you should watch / rate JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4. Dive into its brilliant. Friends, thank you once again for joining me. And in case you missed it, I'm going to be at MagFest. I'd like to do a meetup at some point, so if you're interested and want to come along, do follow me on Twitter. Also, if you consider your boy iPatch Wolf a little holiday solid and help support the channel, then consider heading over to patreon.com/super. I will, of course, be back in the new year, but in the meantime, I invite you to hang out. Let's Find a Boss video game podcast. Friends, enjoy doing whatever it is you like doing this holiday season. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next year.
Diamond. I didn't bring flint. I need to go. Fuck. My home should be set somewhere, preferably warmer. Holy shit, you are one tough mama. It is time to continue proceeding north. Although I think I should sleep first. That's a big chunk. Very nice. There's more. Oh, there's a surprising amount of iron to be found. There's a creeper. I can't use the mouse wheel when I'm crouching. Fuck. Man, I thought those were bees. It's really small plains. This is not a river. This is way too big to be a river. A wither rose. It's a good find if I do say so myself. There's a bunch of them. What is this place? Ow. Since it's a river, no floating islands are gonna spawn in here. This could be considered a lake at best. I'm a queen. The clock's kinda worthless. Finally, some warmth. Although I thought planes would be hotter. I guess I guess climate change has changed the way I perceive normal temperature. This is what normal temperature is supposed to be. Not 34 degrees. Ooh, diamonds. Mi amore. A village. Need food. I can kill some pigs. Talk about a poorly thought out spot. This mod officially makes Minecraft dodgeballs. It's got blocking and dodge rolling. Whoa.
Hello! Right now, you are meant to be watching a feature length video on the strange and fascinating overlap between fictional wrestling personas and their real life human counterparts. However, to say that WWE put a slight roadblock in the way of that video is like saying that Yokozuna could be a little heavy handed. So while I figure out creative ways to not get sued by Vince McMahon and his circus of angry muscle boys, I shall do what I do in all times of darkness. Turn to anime, specifically JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The first one of these videos coming out 7 years ago, in which I hilariously mispronounced actual author Hirohiko Araki's name as Ariaki. That's the last mistake I ever made. What's fun when I think about that video now is this video came out in a time when the combination of JoJo being a copyright nightmare as well as perhaps just a little little too fabulous for the West meant that the idea of it succeeding on a global level felt, well, unlikely. But then, 7 years later, here we are. That is what's happened. So much so that now it kind of feels like that we're in the aftermath of that. A combination of long-term fandom fatigue as well as Netflix's hype-destroying batch releases, meaning the same excitement that was there for the previous JoJo parts just doesn't really feel there for part 6. Which is a bummer to me because Stone Ocean is my favorite JoJo part. Okay, I might have said in the part 4 video that that was my favorite. I don't remember. I'm not watching my own video. But change my mind. Part 6 has issues. Even by JoJo standards, it is weird and convoluted. It has some, we'll call them uneven stand battles, and oh boy, that ending, we'll get to that. But like two beautiful cowboys on a frosty winter's morn, no matter how wrong society tells me it is, I just can't quit part 6. That is why I am here today, to explain to you why I love this beautiful broken part so much, and we should all be way more excited about its anime release than we are. Let us begin. Oh, another reason I haven't posted in a while is that I got married to a very small and complicated and beautiful little person. And I don't talk about her in these videos because I know she doesn't want that, but just this once, I wanted to mention it. I love you, Michelle. You remember. Also, I think I should have left the Brokeback Mountain joke till the part 7 video. That would have been good. Okay, look, depending on what state of weakness you catch me in, I might waver between part 4 and part 6 being my favorite JoJo parts. The same is not true of this next statement. Jolene Cujo is my undisputed favorite JoJo. This is for many, many reasons. What I love is how many of those reasons are incorporated into her character design. Unlike many of her more human fridge-like ancestors, Jolene is, well, not that. Her build is small, slender, feminine. This is not a superhero. This is a teenage girl. And you can see that in everything from her Britney-esque gang tattoo to her braided ox buns, which I have to believe were inspired by this photo of Gwen Stefani, to her wild web jumpsuit and chaotic neon makeup, all making Jolene feel ripped straight from a 90s drug-fueled rave, steeped in the fashion and styling culture of that era. And that alone makes her feel chaotic and rebellious, but even more so when you look at how Jolene's design is the first protagonist since Jotaro to throw off the Japanese / bancho aesthetic. Like, her entire visual identity is an attack on everything, which is appropriate given her anger towards her estranged father Jotaro, but genius of this design is able to also ties her to that same legacy. Jotaro's design, see how his own jacket makes its rectangular space in his chest, does a lot to make him feel imposing, powerful, and masculine. But then in Josuke's design, we see that space transform into a kind of smart shoe that is evocative of Josuke's softer nature, only for that same negative space to tighten into a more defined shape in Journo's design, or finally solidifying into a physical object in Jolene, so subtly and beautifully tying Jolene's design into the Joestar bloodline and every protagonist that is for her. The major theme of part 6 being that your past, that your ancestors, that your memories are an inescapable part of you. It's incredible how Jolene's character design explores that idea. All at once, Jolene is an attack, acknowledgement, and reflection what a JoJo's protagonist is. And you can feel that the moment the story begins, as our brand new, newly incarcerated hero is caught masturbating by a prison guard. Okay, look, I think this moment is actually really vital in understanding the appeal of Jolene. Compare this to the introduction of our other three protagonists, all of which had stands by the time their story begins, whose opening chapters are used to highlight how strong, cool, or beautiful they are. And then we have little pissy pants Jolene. She has no stand, she is weak, vulnerable, and as of the first page, humiliated. But it's from that lowly position we get to watch Jolene's rise over the course of Stone Ocean. That is what makes her special. A growth that begins as soon as she acquires her stand, Stone Free. And it's in Stone Free we can start to see a very different approach in how Iraqi writes protagonists. Unlike Star Platinum or Crazy Diamond, Stone Free is not this ultra-powerful problem solver. Though its combat ability is described as above average, it initially cannot punch through either the stone walls of Jolene's cell or the iron bars which keep her there, something we've seen both Jotaro and to a lesser extent Josuke do. Instead, Stone Free has the ability to produce a small strand of thread. The power of Stone Free coming not necessarily from the stand itself, but how Jolene chooses to use that ability to overcome the stand's limitations. Take this part, for example. Quest mocking Jolene for Stone Free's inability to break down the metal gate between them. A problem Jolene solves by turning Stone Free's fist to string so they can pass through the bars before solidifying on the other side as they collide with Quest's skull. How fucking fun and satisfying is that? Because it's not Stone Free's inherent power that will fight, Jolene's ingenuity and creativity in solving in front of her. And you can see Araki playing with this concept with Journo's gold experience from part 5, a stand initially described as very weak, the only issue there being that gold experience made no goddamn sense at all. And if you say you understood it, you're a liar! A filthy liar! Rather than be just abilities that was piled onto gold experience, Stone Free works off a specific physical set, and watching Jolene learn to manipulate that rule set is a part of what makes her so much fun as a character. For example, using her thread to sew up wounds as a grapple, to steal items and knickknacks as a wire through which to communicate with her allies, as a protective layer of armor to help her intercept incoming attacks, as a subtle way to redirect the force of her opponents, to scorpion harpoon her enemies into giant gravity wells, as a net to protect herself from radiant poisonous frogs, as a detection system to identify invisible zombie crocodiles, to choke other forms, and whatever is going on here. In it, my god, you finished! Just him and in Jotaro's fights he wins because he's awesome and strong, including giving a man a heart attack by just being really, really cool. It's not only a testament to just how much Araki's writing has improved, but also it's in that comparison we can see something else really important. Jotaro is a badass. Jolene becomes one. If you ask me what I love about Jolene, basically none of it is there. Meet her. She is a gullible idiot teenager who has been framed for a hit or run accident actually committed by her rich dickhead boyfriend who has manipulated Jolene through a conniving lawyer into accepting a 15-year jail sentence. But from there, we watch her grow. We watch her come to understand the prison and how it works, how to recognize when someone's trying to take advantage of her, how to stand up for herself, and gradually that growth, that resolve and strength begins to define her as a character, which we can see in one particularly powerful scene when she gets shit thrown on her face. I don't know what I'm doing, which we're going to talk about right after hey, I launched a merch store, and it did so well that it destroyed my manufacturer's pipeline, creating massive stock shortages. Until now, Wolf t-shirt, back in stock. War Grill t-shirt, back in stock. Also, now selling a large, frameless eye patch Wolves poster that will not murder you with postal charges if you live outside the US. And now, introducing two brand new
I can and should make a backpack.
The anticipated Pro long sleeve sweater and the instant hell murder arcade hoodie. So, seriously, I just want to say thank you to everyone who picked up an item of merch. Building your own world and telling your own story through a life of peril is a dumb dream. With you all, it has been a dream. I have been allowed to live it. So, thank you. Go to eyepatchwolves.com to pick up your merch now. Also, subscribe to my Patreon to get 50% off. Okay, now, back to the matter at hand. The fecal matter. Okay, this is genuinely a huge moment for Jolene. This is the point when she's been locked in the ultra security wing, the most vile, frightening, and dangerous part of the prison, where she's blasted with freezing water and given disgusting insect food. When the other male prisoners realize there is a woman among them, they begin to rave and howl with delight, screaming violent misogyny at her. The hurled fecal matter, a horrifying exclamation point of the hell Jolene has now found herself trapped in. It is a genuinely awful and cruel scene, and worse, this is not an opponent Jolene can beat. This is a nightmare that can only be endured. But Jolene realizes that. She acknowledges that she needs to find the resolve within herself to get through this, which she does in the memory of her father, Jotaro. And with that strength comes conviction. This will not break her. She will withstand this and grow stronger from it as she bites down on her moldy bread in an emphatic statement of survival. And fuck, it's such a powerful moment. What I love is how immediately that resolve is tested. Jolene, along with every other dangerous lunatic in the ultra security ring, is released from her cell. All being driven into a violent rage by the stand survivor. And it's here Jolene encounters Westwood, a monstrous pulp security guard obsessed with but he is the strongest, who fixates on Jolene. And this, I'm sorry for this video, is my favorite fight in JoJo. Remember when we talked about Jolene's slighter brain? Well, here is where that starts to matter. The terrifying physical difference between Westwood and Jolene framing this entire fight. Westwood using his massive hulking body to pummel Jolene, beating her to near unconsciousness and dragging her to the ground with crushing chokeholds. Like all that strength,
it's a stable.
All that resolve we've just watched Jolene marshal within herself is now being violently tested. It is brutal, even by the standards of JoJo, but it's through that brutality we get to watch Jolene's new resolve shine, as it manifests in her developing a brand new close range style stand battling, combining Stormfree into her own body and using a combination of stand attacks and martial arts to land several devastating blows against Westwood. And the bit where she grabs Westwood's wrist and Chun-Li kicks the fuck out of him, only to have a hole blown through her arm as Westwood's stand planet waves activates, which causes fucking meteorites to fall out of outer space to track on Westwood but blast to his opponents while disintegrating on contact with him. It's such a brutal and insane escalation, and yet still, through all that, Jolene still fights on, including knocking meteorites out of the sky with her fists before finally brutally beating Westwood in one of the most cathartic conclusions to a stand fight in history. Jolene falling to her knees and just screaming this primal, guttural howl of victory. And God, it's so fucking cool. Because how far does she now feel from that lost, vulnerable child we first met in jail cell? This is what I kind of love about Jolene's progression. Her fights don't feel like a group of disconnected encounters, but a steady escalation of her, as her strategies continue to evolve and her confidence and resolve build with each successive victory, until she is literally willing to fucking set herself on fire to prove that she is stronger. Jotaro is a badass. Jolene becomes one. It's actually in Jotaro that Part 6 does two really interesting things, and the first is how it recontextualizes. When Jotaro appeared in Part 3, he was an extremely entertaining, if not especially deep character, and while I think that simplicity was part of his appeal, what's been interesting since then is watching Araki develop that character in each successive part, and now in Part 6, we peer into him. We see the flawed human part of Jotaro Kujo, a lifetime spent fighting back the evil Dio has created, now isolating him from his family. Jotaro being nearly entirely absent during his life. His coldness, his stoicness, the things that make him so cool and appealing, now the emotional barrier between him and his daughter. Jotaro's presence in Stone Ocean also does something else. Jotaro and his invincible Star Platinum have been two major series antagonists up to this point, making them the ultimate assurance that everything will be okay. Which is why it's so shocking when Whitesnake, the main antagonist stand, early in the story robs Jotaro of both his stand and his memories, leaving him more safe. Not only giving Jotaro a motive in retrieving her father's stand and memories, but placing the onus of the story directly on her. She is the hero no one is coming to save her, making her rise from lowly masturbator to self-immolating badass. Having Jotaro return in Stone Ocean adds a lot to Part 6, but unfortunately, I don't know what really sits to the rest of this cast. Don't get me wrong, I like Hermes, Weather, Oreo, and Anasu, but as individual characters, they never really get the time to breathe or develop their own. As a group, they lack that emotional core that bonded the god-tier supporting cast in Parts 4 and 5, like the residents of Oreo's shared desire to root out evil from their town, or the Bucciarati gang's loyalty to their leader Bruno. Meaning you never get that same electric chemistry that made the cast of those previous parts so enjoyable. Now, I've seen enough Stone Ocean group cosplay to know that I am absolutely pissing someone off, so one thing I do think is really cool about the supporting cast is the thematic thread that runs between them. That thread being memories. Hermes fights to honor the memory of her dead sister. Weather Report's entire story revolves around him recovering his lost memories, and Orio's stand-ability summoning memory of lost objects. Him even living in the memory of a room that no longer exists. And honestly, well, honestly, I don't really know what the deal with Anasui is, except that he used to be a girl, but not even like narratively or in a fun way, because in his flashbacks, he's also a boy. Then maybe he used Diaper Down to rejig his anatomy, and there is this interview where Araki talks about wanting Anosi to be a character beyond gender, but then why is he only a boy in the anime? Because that just makes no goddamn sense at all. Lesson here is that Anosi is a complete mess. Do not try and figure it out in the comments. However, there is one little exception to all my criticisms with this point, so Part 6, and it is... In general, I'm just kind of a sucker for non-human characters pretending to be human, and Foo Fighters is a very entertaining world, but it's in how her character ties to that central theme of
I auto-rolled?
You see, Whitesnake created Foo Fighters. My rocket hard! Proceeding joke was told. Bomber Guy, I would like to take this opportunity to apologize while simultaneously acknowledging that I would do it again. Which he did by taking Plankton and giving it a stand of memories. And initially, the only purpose to Foo Fighters' existence is as a kind of guard dog. Her days spent in an endless repetitive cycle of patrolling a farmhouse and protecting a pile of burn CDs in a tractor. Get there. Each day, an exact monotonous replica of the one that came before it. Her life devoid of context or meaning. And it's only upon meeting Jolien and Hermes that she leaves this place and begins to form bonds and create memories. Even stating, living is more than just being alive. It means making memories. That's the remarkable thing about humans. Their memories give themselves courage. So while I do think the supporting cast in general are weaker than previous parts, I also appreciate how nearly all of them add to that core theme memories. But before we go too far down that particular rabbit hole, I want to take a second and turn our attention to another of the more divisive and, to me, disappointing aspects of Stone Ocean. That is its anime adaptation. I want to be a little careful here. The Stone Ocean adaptation is okay. In terms of being a basic translation of its manga, it's fine. That is why it's disappointing. While you could argue that Part 4's adaptation softened Iraqi's art style a little too much, you cannot argue with what a spectacularly creative visual reinterpretation it is of Diamond is Unbreakable. And while Part 5 put back on the creative visual zaniness, it upped the absolutely insane level of production. And Part 6 does, well, neither of those things. This is disappointing on multiple levels, one of the biggest being that a strong adaptation of Stone Ocean could have made up for one of its weakest aspects. When you think back to previous JoJo parts, think of how drenched the visual culture of locations their stories were. The globe-spanning stand battles of Part 3, the surreal yet cozy streets of Morio of Part 4, or Italy's beautiful blend of Romanesque and Gothic architecture that was the backdrop of Part 5. But then you have Part 6, where the setting is prison, which is just a lot less visually exciting. But an anime adaptation could have done so much to remedy this. There's so much that becomes possible with color, a landscape format, and a team of creative background artists. Think of just how much life was brought to Morio with its wild, surreal color direction. Or hell, even just the neon-soaked palette of the Green Dolphin Penitentiary in Stone Ocean's opening. But what we actually get in the anime is, well, a lot of really uninspired layouts cast in these muddy grey and brown tones. And if I was to use a single word to describe it, it's just dull. Now, I understand dull is not an inaccurate way to describe a prison, but prisons can be lots of things. Oppressive,